welcome to the Ang&Geno show, where we talk about ways for you to grow your life and your business. Hey, welcome.
Hey, Gino, how are you?
I am wonderful, and it's been a few days since we've done this.
It has been. It's nice to be back in the seat with you here talking
Yeah,
about who knows what, right? It's
yeah.
always going to be
Who knows
an
what?
adventure.
So let's talk about. Here's my question. So whenever I'm out in the field, I'm always thinking about us and what we could develop. And so for a lot of years, I didn't work with like really small companies. And the reason is when I first started in my coaching, those were the only companies I was working with. And it was frustrating in the sense that, okay, here's what, why you're not making money. First of all, you're not answering the phone. It
Mhm.
was just the most simplest things you got to get them to do. And for me, that wasn't mentally challenging. It
Mm.
was like so simple: do this, do that, do that. As some of these clients have grown, now it's like, okay, well, we got this challenge at space. So why don't we look for another location over here? Or why don't we hire someone for this? It's more creating solutions rather than something I've done a million times. But I have recently taken two very small companies again. One is one of my best friends from high school. So I've just been on the outside coaching him, and I'm getting a little more involved with his business. And then there's another that was an employee that worked for one of the companies that was one of my clients that sold.
Mhm.
So, when companies sell, they usually kick me to the curb. Um, but he hired me, and so I just went out to his place to visit, and I'm watching. And here's what I love about the guy. I mean, partially, well, not even partially, mostly why I decided to work with this guy is I see a lot of myself in him
Mm.
when I was younger, in that he's just driven. Um, at the company he'd worked for, they were a profitable company, and the owner and the general manager were pretty content with the money they were making.
Mm.
And, I don't care how much money you're making. If you could be bigger, let's be bigger. You
Mm.
know, there's a company bigger than ours. Well, let's get bigger than that. I want to be number one. It's that competitive side of me. And well, this individual has that. So, and again, I think he's 36, so he's young in a sense. Uh, I already know the business, I can visualize where he's going to be in 10 years. He'll be doing well. Um, most might think he's doing well now. I mean, there's a lot of small businesses that would actually love to be in his position now. Anyway, I'm going on a little bit. So here's some of the things I thought about with challenges of new businesses, people that want to start something and they feel
Mm.
they don't have. And usually with starting a new business, it's capital. Do you have the money to start it? The risk. Okay, if I do this, if I give up my regular paying income job to go start this new venture, what if something doesn't happen? I've got two kids, I've got a
Mm.
mortgage, a couple car payments. You know, it it's difficult for people. Um, those are the obvious challenges to a new business. The one that I think gets overlooked is just the time resources.
Mm.
Okay, so you're a new business. You want to build this, and this is a service company, it does home services. Um, you're the guy running the calls in the beginning.
Mhm.
Okay, then you want to hire someone, and by the way, this guy's focus is right. He wants to have the absolute best. There's no shortcuts for what they do. And he's living that right now. I mean, there's suppliers that want him to go train other companies, and I said, well, that's an avenue for you later. Let's right now get you building your business. So anyway, that time resource is tough. And it's
Mm.
tough for me coaching him because it's like, okay, well, we need to hire, you know, we need to train. So he did some hiring. And then what happens? It's all the time spent training. But what is not happening since he's added people is the prospecting for more work.
Mm.
So he's doing essentially the same work as he did last year, volume, but where he was doing all the work and making a lot of money, now he's paying someone else to do it.
But he hasn't
So
grown the business really.
he hasn't grown the business. So, but now he's smart enough. As soon as I was able to line that out to him, as soon as he saw that, oh, I'm not making money right now. Because in
Mm.
his head, I have money in the bank. I must be doing well. That's like, no, you're not making money here. We need to do this. You need to add at least 50K a month to your.
And it is a different frame of mind. I think he's learning through you that there's a different shift when you hire employees, that the cost of doing business changes. Your top line's got to grow because the costs have gone up. So, right. And I think that's a very important place. I think it's really fun to see people go from that I'm an individual worker and then shifting into I have people working for me. It sounds like you're helping him figure out what he needs to do different.
Yeah. Again, he understands the training part because getting the job right is really important to him. Like his company will go behind competitors fixing their stuff, and the competitors hire him because they
Mm.
don't know how to fix it. That's how good he is.
Mm.
Um, Again, he's still really small in in comparison to other companies I work with. Uh,
But it's interesting. I hear something else. This is a very interesting example you bring up. And something you said at the beginning of this story is important to me. And it lines up with something that came up in another one of our podcasts where you talked about doing a sales course and only two people had really done what you had encouraged people to do. And you were kind of blown away by, really, is that the whole rest of the group just not going to do it? And I thought a lot about the idea that I think the kind of growth, the skyrocketing growth comes after people find their feet and their confidence and they're fired up. That's where you recognize that moment where the rockets lined up, the fuel's on board. And I thought about all those people that weren't raising their hands. And I thought, you and I, we were surprised, like, why wouldn't they raise their hands? And the sad truth is a lot of people need to build up their confidence. They raised their hands because they thought maybe I can't do this, or they don't believe in themselves. And it's interesting. I think my focus as a psychologist is getting people to the point where they're fired up and then off they go. You take that. And I think, how many people are there just so close to getting fired up and getting that confidence aligned? And I think so many of us are at a place where we're like, we don't quite believe in ourselves enough yet. We don't quite think we can do it. And you see them when they've gotten it, where they're either in a position to either make or break it and just grow. And it's really neat to see this guy go from being an employee in another business to now starting his own company. That's a huge jump, going from being a confident employee to a capable and confident business owner. And he's lucky to have someone like you now that he's out the gate. And I love
well,
this. It's almost like a horse race, right? You get them from the gate into the race, and I want to help them get into the gate so they can start that race, right? Because once they're fired up, it's so exciting to see what they do with it. I love watching people that are circling. I'm a horsewoman. I don't watch a lot of horse racing, but you see some of those horses that just really aren't ready to get into that chute. And I think us as humans, sometimes you've probably seen people that are just not really ready to kick it off. And that's, knowing what's the word, how motivated you are and capable of getting people to where they want their business to go. You love that moment when you see them fired up. I know that's what gets you. Your brain is like, yeah, this guy's ready.
the fact this guy at this stage in his business
Mm.
realized that I could benefit from a coach. Most people don't do that.
Mm.
It's I and there's employees like high level employees at some of my clients that feel like, wow, we don't need this guy. They want to do it themselves. Yet from the outside, I'm like, well, you could, but you're not.
Mm.
And it's not an ego thing. And it's so hard to not,
Well,
when you say so, like the things you and I do, it's so hard to not, um, it's hard to be humble sometimes.
it is because we do take pride in our success stories. And I think for people that struggle with what is a coach, I say there is no athlete at the top ranks or
Right.
even entry level ranks that doesn't have a coach, that doesn't have a physiotherapist, that doesn't have um, a soulful, we have the kind of coach, some coaches are the soulful coaches that, get you mentally back on track. Some coaches are the performance coaches that track your heart rate variability, your power meter stuff. And so there's no athlete that performs at that top level. There is no doubt that the athlete has succeeded, that the athlete is the one that gets that gold medal. Nothing takes the gold medal away from that athlete. And yet they rely on coaches to get there. Yet, why is it so hard for business people to have someone along with them in the journey, not feel alone? They're still going to get the gold medal. It's still their company, it's still their success. And it is what's sometimes it's painful to watch leaders insist they can go it alone. And maybe they're the stoic ones that you just never learn to ask for help. I just think if you think of every athlete, how the best ones, they work hard. You look at Kobe Bryant, God bless him. He would squeeze that third workout. He'd be up at 4 a.m. to get that third workout in when everyone else was doing too. But he still had his coaches and his drive and his motivation. So it's powerful that, for example, this businessman that you're highlighting here going out on his own, he has unlocked so much joy for his journey also, because the joy of a journey is to have it be shared. You want someone to call who is going to be so happy for you when you succeed. That's another thing a coach does for you, is someone to
Mhm.
celebrate your wins with. And I love that because you get fired up. We both get fired up when our clients, whatever their win looks like, we get fired up on that, and that's more important than the dollars we make.
Yeah. It's interesting too, is you're speaking here. I'm thinking there was a time in my life where I didn't want it. I could do it. I had that mindset. In fact, there would be things that I might in my head discover and share with someone. And if I learned that someone else had already said it before me, I would stop sharing that knowledge because I wanted to only share things that I discovered.
Mm.
What a stupid backwards thinking that was. And
So
now,
that's powerful. So what was your transformation? So the fact that you're here now, you help businesses in that place grow, and you were that person that didn't need help. What were what lined up? Because I think getting ready for change is the hard part. Changing is fast, but the getting ready for what helped you get ready to change your mindset?
so when I got into, I was a buddy had I went to work with a buddy to help him grow his heating and air business. I came from restaurants. And in that, he had sought this consultant that, I was learning from. And in my head, I'm like, I'm smarter than this guy. He's smart, but I know I'm smarter. And that was an obstacle for me because
Mm.
whether I'm smarter or not doesn't matter. The fact that I was not willing to learn anything from him because I was
Mm.
smarter was my handicap.
Mm.
So I don't know what it was that, um, something happened. This is right around 30 years old. I realized that, you know what? As a young male, I remember at 18, I had it all figured out. And by 21, I remember looking back at the 18-year-old version of myself thinking, what a dumb kid I was, at 25, looking back at 21 again. And there was always this thing. The farther I got down the road, the more I realized, oh, I thought I had it all figured out, but I didn't. And it
Mm.
was about 30 when I realized that's probably a trend that will continue the rest of my life, which now I'll be 56 in a couple months. I know that there's so much more to learn than I've
Mm.
ever learned already. So that for me made it okay. And to overcome the challenge that I didn't ever want to, here's what happened. I'd hear people tell a story or share a knowledge like it was their own that I knew I read that book too.
Mm.
You're sharing it like it's all your super smarts, but I learned that. I know where you learned that from. And so I guess I frowned upon the people that made it look like it was their genius that they're sharing.
And
Now,
so that's interesting because so to kind of capture this journey, because I think there's something to learn from your journey. So let me capture some things. So first, I think I hear that as you were growing up, you were reflecting. So I think the power of a little reflection on yourself was a tool that you used. Number one. Number two, you school helps us understand that we're bright. The world helps us understand when we're smart. We know. So being smart enough is great, but you shifted when you, it sounds like, realized that there was more to learn, and that perpetual learning in life didn't mean you weren't smart. And now I think you realize this last point is interesting, is that you could learn things and assimilate them and make them a part of what you did and not feel that, well, that was someone else's stolen knowledge. So is it more the permission of being able to incorporate what you know from others?
yeah, well, so here's what I've done for me to deal with it. First of all, if I know it's something I learned somewhere else, I always give credit to it. Most of the time, I don't remember the author. I'll say, yeah, I forget what book, but I read this somewhere. And that just makes me, because I don't ever want someone to go, oh, yeah, I read that book too. I don't want someone doing to me what I did to them.
Mm.
Um, but however, on the other side of it, there's a discovery I made. We talk personality stuff. You do the Myers-Briggs stuff, and I told you I got my own. I've read lots of books on the personality types. I've taken a lot of those tests, and um, I discovered that there's the golden rule: do unto others as they want done unto them, right? And I realized, and my mom taught me that, so that was something I grew up with. That's what you do, and in my first marriage, that was kind of how I functioned. But after learning these different personalities, I realized, oh, people
Mhm.
want to be treated different. So if I treat everybody like me, then I'm not treating them as they want to be treated. So in my head, I thought, oh my God, the platinum rule, you know,
Mm.
do unto others as they want done unto them. And so I'm like, I'm thinking this is a book. This is a breakthrough. There's already a website. There's already somebody, I mean, the exact phrase used in the exact context of which I so what I do now is I realize, okay, maybe they did discover it themselves. There's been many things. I remember, I don't know, the Mobius strip. I don't know if you know, if you just take a ribbon and twist it halfway and it has one side. I remember making this discovery and explaining to my parents that no, it has only one side. They're like, no, there's two sides. I'm like, no, it's one side. Anyway, I was just a kid at that time. Well, later they saw it on TV. Oh, you were right. If you cut it down the middle, it's still one thing. That's like, oh, I wish I would have thought of that. You know,
So this is beautiful. So I think this is that area of thinking, and you can call it area of psychology. Anything about people can be called psychology, but it's this area of thinking we call naturally convergent thinking. And convergent thinking is the way ideas naturally come together. And you're talking about this way, it's like, well, maybe you did come up with it, and maybe someone else did come up with it independently. There have been in the world of research, there have been discoveries that are very similar made on completely different continents. And before the internet was invented, before we could share things, the internet and the World Wide Web really connected research and scientists originally. It was just a very powerful way to share data and information that you'd have to wait for a congress or a conference or a symposium to share. Here are my findings. And that's why meetings and conferences were such exciting places. And then the internet is like, you could post your research online. Someone says, here's my numbers. And so that's one place we see this idea of convergent thinking. You've discovered it with this idea of your platinum rule, which I think is powerful. And your little Mobius strip discovery as a child, right? As a youngster. You and I have also discovered this and shown this to the work in the workshops that we lead. When we do, I won't give away the activity, but there's that activity we do, we call it the construction company activity. You'll notice when we ask people to do that very last phase where they have to reduce the number of pieces that go into the tool, you start to see the convergent thinking because we're pressuring them to make timely decisions. We're pressuring them under specific circumstances, which is great decision making, team building training. But did you notice how what they were getting themselves whittled down to started to become more and more similar? And they were
Yeah.
working separately. We kind of told them, hide your designs, don't let others steal your ideas. And so I think there's this beautiful thing that humans can do. It's sometimes called, I call it converging on a natural truth. And I think people that think deeply do converge on their own natural truths. And I don't think it takes away from that natural truth to discover, oh, it's already on the web. Oh, there's already a book. There's always room for a new way to share an idea. That's
You
why
just
I'm
made me,
inspired to even do this podcast. There's a million podcasts out there, but I'm hoping that you and I bring our heart and soul to it in a way that these are our truths, the way we want to share them.
all this make me think of that, say, the 100th monkey. Do you know that one where about the
No.
sugar beets? I think so. There was, and I may butcher this a little bit. I think an island somewhere there's monkeys, and they were giving them sugar beets and some of the monkeys discovered that if you go down to the water and rinse them off, get the sand off of them, you don't have to eat the sand. So, um, well, they found that eventually, after some time, I don't know what it was, but they would know even if there wasn't sand on them, they liked putting them in the water to wash them without, for whatever reason, just washing them, maybe salty water or something. I don't know what the reason was, but it didn't have to be a dirty sugar beet for them to want to go do it in the
Mm.
water. And the interesting thing is, once they got to 100 monkeys doing this as a natural thing in that island, they noticed that they were doing it in other parts of the world as well.
Oh, is that the Deepak Chopra universal energy that we're all connected? I mean, how so where that's the magic. I can't explain it. In none of the research background I've read or done can explain that, but to me, that is, I love that idea is just blows my mind, and it makes my brain and my dopamine fire, right? It's the exciting stuff of what if, how, what do you think that is? Where does your mind go on that? That's where my mind goes, to this
Yeah.
kind of universal connection of, is there a place where all our minds, this notion of the collective unconscious and the past and the present, that's some of my ideas. What do you think?
So you're opening a door that I don't enter with a lot of people, and to do this on a podcast. And here's why: the fear of being, oh, these guys are kooks,
Mm,
you know. So I'm a firm believer, and this has been more of a recent discovery. I'm talking within the last 18 months of these rabbit holes I've gone down, where I am convinced that we're all part of this collective
mm,
something that is inexplainable. And it started for me with um, I started digging into quantum physics. I mean,
mm,
it's just fascinating to me, the the contradicting truths,
mm,
the mutually exclusive, um, things. I think maybe we've talked about this before with, light is both a particle and a wave, although they're mutually exclusive, right? There's things we cannot explain.
Mm,
And so, uh, and you and I may have spoken about this before. There was a story of this young boy who was remembering a past life. And of course, everybody's going to be skeptical of this. Okay, past life. What does this mean? Well, he had these nightmares of plane crash and fire. And um, then he got to this point where his dad was looking through a World War II book or something. He says, "Oh, that was my ship." You know,
mm,
he was able to name the ship he was from. He knew his name. He knew his friends. He knew where his plane went down.
mm,
He could remember all this stuff. He says, "Oh, yeah, when I was big, that's where." And so, because of this memory that way, it was easy to document.
mm.
That was,
There's so much detail.
yeah.
So, in case this is getting a little out there for our listeners, I want to ground them in a book they can read if this is interesting to them. A psychologist named Dr. Joseph Chilton Pierce wrote a book. He was a child psychologist, but also very much into brain formation and function as a researcher. And he wrote a book, many books, but one of his books called Evolution's End uh, really delves into the physiology of the human brain. And he talks about how big our brain is, Gino. He says we have the biggest brains on land. Uh, he says there is no way it grew this big by accident. He said evolution happened so slowly across time, and it happened so slowly across time that for our brains to get this big, for evolution to expand our brains to get to this size, he says that in our modern life, we are not fully using our brain's capacity. So, my son was looking at a picture of some deep universe images coming back. And it looks like this amazing butterfly shape of light where it just comes out of a point. We talked about it looked like lungs, it looked like a butterfly, it looked like a neuronal system. And and we were talking about how we don't understand if until we can explain where the universe ends. I believe that we have the ability and the capacity to really consider and contemplate all of these options as possibilities. A past life, a collective unconscious that lives currently. I mean, these are fun things to dream on. Man dreamed about flying and it felt impossible. We have stories, mythological stories of, gluing wax wings on our arms with wax and flying too close to the sun, and look where we've gotten. We've gotten a man on the moon. So that would have been, I mean, you would have been like tied up and killed 500 years ago for even contemplating such a thought. So maybe those of us that are not afraid to have the conversation now, or maybe we're going to be well past our time. We won't be here, but maybe we're going to know enough to know that maybe some of these things are possible. I mean, the data of that little boy I mean, it's fascinating that he could pick all of that out.
Well, what blows me away is that, so let me finish this a little bit, because this is what baffles me. And maybe some psychological reason why this happens. So, because of that story, I wanted to know, is this just some one off thing or is there more? So I went down the
Mm,
rabbit hole, and there are in the US thousands of documented cases. Again, they're not as strong as this. A lot of the kids don't remember to the same detail, or their past life just wasn't that interesting. So there's no way to track the data. However, in India, where they believe in reincarnation,
mm,
if a kid says something, they automatically investigate it. Where
mm,
here, it's just you're imagining things. Especially in our Christian society, this is, although it's funny, Jesus can be reincarnated, but people can't.
mm.
um, my point is, and I'm not saying that any, it doesn't contradict. I believe that as far as people's religions, all of them can be, this can be true within all of them.
Yes.
We put these boundaries on things, which is where I'm going. So in my mind, I found more evidence because I've also looked for things to disprove this.
Mm,
And I found more evidence substantiating these claims of reincarnation. Now, does that mean we all are reincarnated? I don't know.
mm,
But if one person can be, then that's something inexplainable.
yeah.
And so there are certain things in the world that we don't understand. And so we want to just say, well, then if it can't be, or that doesn't make sense. And now the true scientists, like again, quantum physics is fascinating.
Mm,
And if you ever meet somebody that says they understand quantum physics, they are lying because nobody really understands it. That's
mm.
why it's so fascinating.
You talk about, is there some psychological phenomenon, and when I think about what quality allows humans to engage in this kind of contemplation, I would think, and it's a very important area that we don't talk enough about, but there's something we call in psychology a tolerance for ambiguity. And that means ambiguity is the not knowing, or the not having a perfect definition, or not having a complete picture. And we do see that some humans have a high tolerance for ambiguity. They're comfortable living and working and thinking about things that are ideas like this, that are not clearly definitive, that are not clearly accepted or understood. And that tolerance for ambiguity allows for the drops of wisdom and learning to help keep us moving forward. People that have had this tolerance for ambiguity have been where humans have made the greatest strides. I think there are other people that have less tolerance for ambiguity, and they can change their tolerance for ambiguity. I don't think this is something like, you can put six fingers on your hands. I mean, that's a lot harder to do. But I think something like opening up your tolerance for ambiguity is important. But when you take someone with a high tolerance for ambiguity and you try to have them engage someone with a low tolerance for ambiguity, boy, it can be a challenge, and it just makes for very awkward conversation. And I think that's even where you come in. You go, well, Angela, I don't know, I don't talk about this with a lot of people. And in some ways that's you saying, I don't meet a lot of people with a high tolerance for ambiguity. And I think if that's the kind of conversation you want, I think that's where scientists can talk about the what if. Some scientists actually don't have a high tolerance for ambiguity. Some scientists study in only in areas that provide a high degree of concrete evidence. So even inside of science, Gino, we see some researchers much more comfortable with tolerance of ambiguity, where they're studying something that they can't quite explain, but they're out there gathering data. And you're one of those people. You have a high tolerance for ambiguity. And curiosity is a cousin of a high tolerance for ambiguity, because to not understand something but to stay there is means that you have curiosity as well, and you're willing to look, learn, and listen. And I think for me that's a very exciting end of the world life spectrum to live at. I'm with you on that. That's why we love these conversations. We don't have any answers, but it's an exciting conversation.
Yeah. And, I guess for me too is I like living in a little bit of a state of awe.
Mm. Oh,
That's what I
that's
love
true.
about,
Yeah.
you go to the Grand Canyon or something. There's just things you in nature you live, you're talking about you and Eddie looking at pictures of deep space. Those things coming from the James Webb. Wow.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. Yeah. Yes. And just think about that humans can. And it's funny that we can see, in some ways, we can see farther in to the ambiguity and yet still not be comfortable having those conversations. Uh, and maybe, Gino, in a way, we're being distracted by the kinds of things that are not as, that are more, I don't know, whatever's hip or whatever's on Instagram. And I have to say, when you start finding science, you start getting these beautiful, there's a lot of beautiful stuff on Instagram that's meaningful around science discoveries and people posting. And you can make your insight, I encourage people, make your Instagram feed what you would like it to be, not what the mainstream media wants it to be. If you want more about science or psychology, you can shape your Instagram feed. One of the shame, it's a shame. It's a shame that sometimes the feed wants to regress us to the mean.
Yeah.
Whereas there are some fabulous people on Instagram, on YouTube that
And TikTok.
are, yeah, TikTok, podcasts. Here we are. And I encourage people to really push on their curiosity and type something into Instagram that will really make your dopamine fire and your curiosity fire and your awe. I love the word awe you use. Life is awe-inspiring. It should be awe-inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Should we end here?
This might be a good place. And I'm laughing. My head is going, wow, where did we start? And where did we end up? Wow,
Yeah.
what a roller coaster for our people listening. I hope they
Yeah.
held on tight and made that turn with us. But to go from this knowledge, where did we depart on this one? Just to kind of loop around. I think at the point where you said, hey, the 100th monkey washing beets, they realized that the similar thing was happening in other places, right? What is that connection? Is
Yeah.
that convergent learning? Is that all of a sudden sand doesn't taste good to monkeys and that's the natural evolution? I'm happy for all that to be the right answer. Sometimes something that feels awe-inspiring then becomes the mundane. Humans flying was awe-inspiring. Now it's mundane. That's okay, right? It's okay to
Yeah.
go from awe-inspiring to a very mundane explanation. Um, but it's fun hanging there waiting for the answer. Anyways, awesome time talking about this with you, Geno. I love this.
Yeah. I always enjoy my time with you, Ange. This is it's always fun.
Ditto.
So okay, so let's wrap up here and we'll catch y'all next time.
You got it. Look forward to you and other people joining us.